Welcome back to the Blocks Fetch Repair YouTube channel. Today we're working on our 1955 Studebaker. We are working on more rust. Previously I ripped this fender off to find more rust, and sure we did. I already cut out that rust and put a patch panel in right there. Flux core welding as always, so it looks terrible. Ignore it, we'll grind it down, it'll look good. We have this rust here we need to replace. We have some rust along here we need to repair. And we got that giant hole there on both the inner and outer part, which needs repaired, and this bottom seam that needs repaired. So, let's get cutting, and let's get welding. Well, I managed to somehow misplace my microphone, so I just was doing this, figuring I'll find the microphone eventually. I did not find the microphone, and now I've finished this entire inner fender, so I guess I'll catch you up. As you can see, we've pour 15 the entire inside here, now that we've fixed some rust. I also discovered that this entire section here is filled with lead. I guess from the factory, they just smoothed this out with lead for some reason. Which means I don't feel at all bad about having to smooth out the pieces of metal I had to weld in, because that was all rusted out, that was all rusted out. So, it's been pour 15 now. It's not the top coat that will go on this, obviously. On this, actually, another piece of metal sits on top of this, but over here, it'll get sanded back down. That'll get into proper epoxy primer and all that, but as you can see, got all that welded in, all that welded. It's looking absolutely beautiful. Now we need to work on the outskin. Here is the inside of that fender, and it's looking pretty good. Just a small amount of rust down there. Now, Studebaker actually used 18 gauge metal for their body panels, which is a lot thicker than modern cars. Modern cars like 20 to 22, I believe. So this stuff is a lot thicker, which is probably why it hasn't fully rusted out, and also why it's not covered in door dings and all that fun stuff. These older cars were genuinely built heavier. Took the plasma cutter and plasmaed out all the rust that's in there, so let's get some new metal and weld it in place. Now we need to hit this with the grinder and make that disappear. Now I need to flip this thing over. We can rust convert the entire inside, and I'll also probably do this bottom edge a while. And then we gotta pour 15 the entire inside. Interestingly, there's more lead here on this fender. As you can see, somebody filled trim holes. I'm gonna guess this used to have trim running down the side. Looking online, it probably did. Somebody probably just got rid of that. Somebody removed the stuff off the trunk, and I guess they probably removed the stuff off the side. I guess they wanted a cleaner look. Personally, I'm a fan of the chrome, but yeah, I guess it probably would have had this trim originally. Really wish I had that, but unfortunately I don't, so I'm just gonna leave the lead. Now we let this rust converter sit on here for a while to convert that iron oxide to iron phosphate like always, and then we wash it off and we hit it with some pour 15. Hopefully get this thing mounted tonight, but it might be too wet. We'll find out. I guess I'll just wear gloves and get covered in pour 15. There we go. I moved it inside here to dry overnight, and then once in the morning, we should be able to get this thing actually mounted on. And again, move on to the engine, because I'm tired of working on rust for now. The fender's on. Obviously, there'll be a lot of work that needs done whenever we go to actually paint the car, but we're a long way away from needing to paint the car, so it's fine that it looks terrible for now. We need to move on to the front fenders. What the hell? This thing has like a foot's worth of Bondo in. This is ridiculous. Come on. Oh, to smooth out this little edge here that probably rusted out and bubbled out some. Oh my god, I gotta do so much, I guess, grinding to get all this stupid stuff up. It is adhered extremely well, to be fair. But I need to get it off so I can cut out the rust and replace it. I figured it out. This is why it's so dang thick. It was actually tried to be repaired right. It's not as sketchy as I thought, where they were trying to cover up the rust with the body fill. It looks like whoever did this, I don't know why the welds are gold. I doubt it's brazed. It's not stainless, but who knows? I'm not a welder. As you can see, that's a new piece of metal. That is a new piece of metal that is welded in with those fancy gold welds. That was welded on top of the existing metal, on top of the rust. Instead of cutting out the rust, that was welded on top, which is why it's re-rusted out. Again, just worse. But that's why the body fill is so thick, it had to cover up that additional layer of metal. That explains a lot. But also, what the hell? So I went ahead and ground it down to actually the seams of where the new metal was welded in. You can see that square there, and you can very easily now see the strip that was welded in right here. I'm going to grab the plasma torch and I guess start cutting, though. I don't really want to cut too deep, because on this edge here, I don't want to cut through the bottom layer, but I guess right there, it really doesn't matter. I can just cut that square out. Good news, everyone! It's not near as bad as I actually was thinking. This is going to be easy. As you can see, I plasma cut out all the rust for the most part. There's some stuff on the mount for this door that'll have to repair. But ignoring that for now, we had to repair that square there. We knew about that. And this section right here. There's the original antenna hole. There was a plate welded, or whatever that gold stuff was, attached to the top there. That's still very hot from the plasma cutting. But the reason this rusted out from the factory is because they rolled over the metal right here, and they didn't put any paint or anything in between it, so obviously moisture got in there, rusted out, bubbled it out, and that's what rusted this section out on all these fenders. That makes sense. That means we're not going to make that same mistake, and we're going to be rust coating the hell out of this piece of metal before we weld on a new piece of metal. So we're going to be careful about that. Also, once I weld on a new piece of metal, I'll probably slip some more paint down in there, because it'll probably burn off most of the paint when I weld it on, to be fair. But as you can see, we just have to replace a strip going up right here and that square, and this fender will actually be pretty good. It is now day, so I can actually get to work on this and get this repaired. We have some rust we got to take care of in our underlayer here. We'll fix that up. That's not a big deal. And I also can see that it was orange on top of the body fill. So while under the dash, this car is red. This car has been semi-restored incorrectly, but semi-restored with all this body fill, then repainted orange, and then repainted this green. So somebody was very, I don't know, couldn't make up their mind on what color they wanted this, I guess. So they just kept repainting it. We're going to put it back to the original orange. No, not the original orange. The original red, and put a white top on it, because I've got to look awesome. But let's get to cutting out this last little bit of rust that we got to take care of, and then we can start welding in new metal. Got our patch panel for right there cut out. I used a plasma torch to make the top line up, which is why it's a little better than there. But we're going to get this in, and we're going to very slowly tack this in all around very slowly, because if we go fast and just try and weld a bead, it's going to warp the panel, and that is the last thing I want, because I don't want to put a 1/4 inch of Bondo on this panel. We got that welded in. Unfortunately, it did warp some. I'm hoping I can straighten that out as I weld in this patch panel. I should have probably done this first, and then, because it warped here on this thin side, I probably should have welded this in first, but who knows. Let's get this welded in and see what we can do. Well, of course, it had to start raining, so I set up this canopy to work under. As you can see, I found some thin spots I had to cut out. We're going to have to weld in new metal there. I already patched that spot right there, so I'm going to get some pieces of scrap marked up to weld into right there, and then we're going to start rust coating this strip here. We're going to rust convert it, and then we're going to pour 15 this thing here. I also ground down all the major rust that was sticking up in here that was going to prevent our new piece of metal from laying nice and flat. But let's get those pieces cut up and welded in. I also discovered you got to be pretty careful with this plasma torch. Luckily, my fingers go nowhere near the tip of this thing. I knew where my fingers were, I just didn't know where the tip of the glove was, and good lord, it just shot through that like it was nothing. It just immediately shot through that. While I'm waiting for this paint to dry, we're going to flip this back to stand upright, because I need to repair some of the little hoop thing that goes on the inside of this that connects it to the vent on the car itself. So we can repair that and actually have that to connect to the car, because it's quite rusty. Now, as you can see, this is the really rusty spot. We still have this, it's still functional. I was able to actually unbolt it, but that's surprising. We need to cut out all of this rust here and repair it. I think the sides are actually still very solid. It's only the top and bottom that rusted out for some reason, so we're going to cut off the top and bottom and weld in a new loop. That should be fairly simple, so I'm going to get on that. There we go. Now I'm starting to tack in this panel here that after I've already painted the underside of it. And the other thing, it has started raining a lot heavier. It's still not very heavy, so I'm good. And the canopy's keeping me from being totally soaked. But let's get this tacked on, hopefully pull out some of this warp as we go, and hopefully not warp it any further at the very minimum. I got half of it in, and I did pull out a good bit of the warpage, so that's really good. That makes it a whole lot less to have to actually straighten out with a dolly and a hammer. That's awesome. Unfortunately, I did have to cut my splice into 2 pieces here, as I didn't apparently cut my splice perfectly straight, so it was veering way far off from where it was actually going to be able to mount. So I cut it off there. We'll be able to weld it in this direction, bend it back over, and I think we'll get a good, nice curve, and also pull out any warpage. So this should be the final piece that needs welded into this fender, I think. I already welded in those loops I haven't actually shown you yet, but they're welded in. So I think this is the final panel for this fender. Obviously, we'll have to actually finish welding it in after I finish all these tacks, but we gotta be very careful, because I don't want to warp it as bad as I did with that square. I really screwed up with that square, so without further ado, let's weld this in. We're getting somewhere. I ran out of batteries. It's getting late out, so I'm gonna call it quits for now. As you can see, I've done some work. Unfortunately, I found a little bit more rust right here, but that's a small patch. That won't take too long. I said that about all of this, and it took all day, but we're getting somewhere. As you can see, it's looking a whole lot better. We need to take it with a grinder a little bit more to finish taking off all the high spots. I spent a small amount of time with the hammer and dowel. I need to spend a lot more time with it, but I got some of the waviness out of this. Just a little bit more right and through right here what we're going to have to get out, but I got the majority of it, the bad stuff out right there. We'll have to do a lot more work once we actually get like a block sand to sand all of this body fill fully off to flatten this out, because we're going to need to do a lot of sanding to get this flat, and we will have to use a small thin layer of putty on this, but hopefully not a 1/4 inch like it was here originally. And now this will hopefully not rust back out in the future. This is looking absolutely fantastic though. Major improvements. Gone ahead and wire wheeled the entire inside here of the fender. That's going to get 415. And as you can see, my very thick layer of dirt. That's awesome. We're going to dump that out, and then we're going to rust convert this, and then we're going to paint this entire inside with 415. But first we need to remove everything. Got to remove that bracket. We're going to pull out the headlight, remove that horn, pull out the battery compartment, and all the fun stuff like that, so we can get this 415, and we can work on getting everything else. The battery compartment, I think I'm generally just going to paint white with the rest of the stuff that's getting painted white. That we're going to have to figure out if we can rebuild, if we're going to have to replace, and the headlight, I just need to not be in there. So I'm going to rip all that stuff out, and then we can get started rust converting this. There we go. Now we let that dry. Once that dries, we'll do something. I threw that fender over there, and I've slapped the other fender on here, and I've gone ahead and plasma cut out all the rust. As you can see, it's not quite as far over, but it's still just as bad pretty much as the other fender, if not worse. Now, I was wrong. I thought this fender had not been repaired previously, but it had been. It has, as you can see, this is a section I cut out of right here, I think? Yeah, right there. I cut this section out of right here, and as you can see, there is a repair on this from a previous rust hole. This repaired was a lot older than the repair on the other fender, because this one's repaired with lead, so that one's a whole lot older, which I don't know what the hell was going on with this car. Somebody was doing a lot of work to this at many different points, but I've gone ahead and not quite cut out that piece I see to weld in there, so I'll have to trim that a little bit. Then we'll get that welded in, then I got to get this rust converted and painted, and then we can get our strip right here welded in. This time, I'm going to weld in this strip before I do any of these little squares to hopefully minimize the amount of warpage I have from this thin side over here. Well, I've done a little bit more cutting out, and there is putty on this side. Now, this side was done much more correctly. The putty is like not even 1/2 millimeter thick at the thickest. That is how putty should be done. That's looking beautiful. But I can't catch a break. There's lead on this side, there's putty on this side. It's wild, but got a little bit more of it out, just to repair a little bit more further down, and also cut out a little bit of this lower section and repaired it. So now it's time to rust coat that lower section before we go ahead and get it painted. As you can see on this fender, we went ahead and cut out and replaced all of the rust on that seam right there, so we just need to repair those 2 spots there. I already cut them out with the plasma cutter. Now I'm going to get some cardboard, mock up the pieces we need, then I'm going to cut them out of metal, get them all bent up, get them all welded in, and we should be good there. Then we just have to repair the inner part that connects this air vent to the rest of the car, which that'll be a little bit more fun because that's a very complicated shape. And there we go. We now have both of the fenders, the rust cut out and repaired. We have them painted on the inside with our undercoating stuff, our 415. Now what we need to do is get the outsides ready to be primered. What I'm going to do is just simply sand off all of the old body fill because there's a lot of body fill on these panels for some awesome reason. This one doesn't have as much, but it has some, and this one has a lot. We're going to sand these down. We're not going to worry about it being perfectly like square or anything yet. We're going to then spray it with our primer, our epoxy primer, and then I can actually get these things mounted on the car, because once these are painted with the epoxy primer, I'll be able to paint the insides with their white and clear coat. And we'll leave these epoxy primer for now, and then we can do the body work on top of the primer, and then we can get these things finished up when they're on the car, when we're doing the rest of the body work for painting. Technically, we could do our body fill before we hit it with the epoxy primer. Most body fills are possible to just put directly on metal, and it would be fine, but I don't really like that, and we're just going to put the epoxy primer on this so we can work on the body work whenever we work on the body work on the rest of the car. So I'm not going to worry about that, but we'll put these with the nice coat of epoxy primer. And then, of course, once we do the body work, we'll put another coat of primer on top of all that. But we're just going to put some epoxy primer on this. It'll help fill some of these pittings from all this rust and stuff, so it'll make it a little less body fill that we actually need, hopefully. I don't actually know. I've never done this before. Okay, so I'm confused. I have been sanding away at this for a long time. As you can tell, I've gotten all this down to bare metal. That was not my goal. My goal was just to get rid of all the body fill. The problem is, I keep finding it. Now, I'm starting to think maybe this is an epoxy primer or just a really thick primer that was put on the entire thing. The problem is it's not everywhere. Like, this upper half doesn't have any. It's only, like, well, but there's some up here, but there's not over here. I have no idea what's going on with this thing. I don't know if they just skim-coated the majority of this fender with Bondo or what, but it is really annoying. and it's taking a really long time to strip all this down. Unfortunately, I'm not going to be getting to painting these today. I was really hoping to get them painted today, but it's going to start raining here soon-ish, so I'm going to get these out of the where rain could hit on them now that they're, you know, raw metal. They were already raw metal, to be fair, but now they're really, really raw metal. Well, this one is. That one's still the same amount of raw metal, but get these covered up. I'm not going to get them primered. I was hoping to do that, but it's going to start raining, and I'm not going to have these stripped down in time. This has taken a lot longer to strip these down than I could have ever imagined. So I guess we're gonna wait on that. I'm gonna get a different tool to actually strip this down. It should strip it down a whole lot easier than what I've been trying to do. So hopefully in the next part we'll get these painted. These things here we're also gonna strip down, get these down to bare metal-ish. They're pretty rusty, but I'm not terribly concerned about that. I mean, this is I'm slightly concerned about. This part, you're not actually seeing that. That's the hood latch bar that goes across the front here under the hood. I'm not concerned about that, but we'll get that stripped down and then we'll primer that with the epoxy primer. We'll probably paint that white with the rest of the engine bay, and then this here will get primered a while. We might have to do some pit filling on this with some putty whenever we do the rest of the bodywork on the car. This thing's pretty rusty. This is the lower grille section, which it is unfortunately dented quite a good bit there in the center. We'll have to see if we can work out any of that dent from somebody running something over at some point. We got brand new shocks here in the front. I have new shocks for the rear, but of course both upper shock bolts broke, and apparently they use a fancy custom bolt that's like hex shape that goes in, or square shape. I'll have to order some of those, so right now we have no shocks in the rear, but at least we have new shocks here in the front. Now I'd like to start on the wiring, but I really don't want to do that until I actually have the fenders on, so I can get everything mounted to the fender, so I have the exact length of all the wires and stuff that I need to redo. But we're going to be redoing the entire wiring in this entire car. Every single wire is getting replaced, because simply I do not trust any of it. If you remember on that blower motor over there, the wire on it, all the insulation was cracked off of it, and I imagine a few of these other wires are like that, and I don't want this car to catch on fire. One more thing I would like to do is this radiator support here. We're going to get this painted, obviously, but we need to remove the broken bolts first. This thing was not the best for getting the bolts out of. That one broke, that one broke, that one broke, that one broke, and that one broke. So that's a little ridiculous. Figured since I'm walking right past the car with the fender, I might as well just hold it up here and see how it's going to look. It's obviously not in the exact right position. There's a little bit too much of a gap there and all that. I'm just holding it up with my knee right now, but this is going to look so good. I cannot wait to have these back on the car and have it looking like a car again, because it looks so much better with these on. We'll also have to re-drill our antenna hole into the fender there, since originally one of the previous owners covered that hole up because it was all rusted out and moved the antenna to the back, but we're repairing, well actually we already finished repairing the original Studebaker crank up antenna that mounts right here, so we'll be able to mount that back in and have a beautiful hand crank antenna on the inside. We're also going to have to run a new fuel line. This right here, while it looks good on this end, it broke around in the center there, so we're just going to have to run a whole brand new fuel line, put a new fuel filter in line probably right in somewhere around here, and rerun that to our new fuel pump. And then once we get our carburetor back on, get that on, we need to get a radiator still. They sell an aluminum one, so I'll have to get an aluminum radiator, so that'll be expensive, but it should at least keep this nice and cool, and then we can hopefully maybe drive this thing one day. I also got some corn head grease to refill our steering box there, because I imagine it's empty, and I know it's empty because I opened it up and I couldn't find any grease inside of it, so we're just going to refill that. I was told the corn head grease, the like John Deere stuff, works great in these, so I got a tube of that to refill that, and we should be good there. I also found where I could buy a reproduction pindler, so we're going to be able to reinstall that. As you can see, our original one's just completely shattered away. So unfortunately, I think we have to pull the whole steering wheel out to get to that, but we'll be able to remount that in there, and then we'll be able to tell what gear we're in, which it looks like we're actually in low range right now. I had to move that around to actually connect that linkage to the transmission, but that'll be a lot nicer to be able to actually tell what gear we're in, especially since it doesn't follow the modern gear shift direction. I've never seen a pendler before. But while I have the steering wheel off, that'll give me a good chance to try and fix these cracks. I'll probably try and inject some like rubber stuff, like the casting rubber I used to build the transmission mounts and stuff. Try and recast those cracks. We'll probably have to repaint this steering wheel, but that shouldn't be a big deal, hopefully. I'm not actually sure. I'll have to do some research into that, of course, but I don't like these cracks. It's a metal steering wheel underneath, so the cracks aren't really structural per se, but they look terrible. So we'll hopefully refill those cracks and get the steering wheel repainted. That'll look nice. And again, we had to fix all of the wiring in this car, which is going to be fun. The radio, I haven't actually installed yet. It's been sitting on the workbench ever since I finished repairing that. But I guess in the next part, hopefully we'll get those fenders painted, we'll get the dash and everything ripped out of this thing, and we can rewire the entire car. I found an entire wiring diagram for it. It's really not that complicated. This right here is the entire wiring diagram for the car, not including accessories, but this is very simple compared to some other wiring diagrams. Look at one for a modern car, and it'll be like 50 times this size. This is, again, very simple. It even has all the colors for the wires and stuff. Unfortunately, we're not going to be able to recreate those colors exactly, but I'm not going to just wire everything the same color. We're going to do our best to keep everything its own individual color, but I don't even know where you buy black and oak colored wire, or more specifically, chrome colored wire. That would cost me a fortune to buy all of those specialty colors, but we're not going to do that. Most of them have probably faded anyway to all be basically the same color, but this should be a fairly simple rewire. And then right here's all the wiring diagrams for the accessories. We don't have a lot of these. We don't have the clock light, backup light we do not have, fog lights we do not have, starter and anti-creep circuit we do actually have, the cigar lighter we do have, we don't have, I don't think we have the glove compartment, we don't have the engine, we don't have the luggage, we don't have the rear window, I think we have the heater and defrost, we don't have the spotlight, and we do actually have the turn signals. But yeah, backup lights and turn signals were apparently an accessory or an option back in the 1955. We don't have the backups, but we do have the directions at least. Now don't worry, we're going to be doing this properly enough. We're not going to be just filling this with a bunch of spaghetti and then zip tying it all together. We're going to actually properly tape it together. I got a few rolls of this actual electrical harness tape. This is fabric type tape that's super stretchy and sticks to itself really well, so we can rewrap our wiring harness properly and it'll actually look factory-ish. This, I guess, used a more electrical tape style. It might just be electrical tape, actually, from the factory, but more modern wiring harnesses tend to use this kind of stuff. Now, there is actually a company, I believe, that sells wiring harnesses for this car, but I think they're like $1,000, and honestly, you know what I can do for $1,000? Build my own damn wiring harness, so we're going to be doing that. It's, again, not that complicated. Now, I understand I'm saying that from a position of actually knowing electrical systems and wiring schematics and all that fun stuff, so it might be a little bit more complicated for somebody that doesn't actually understand that stuff, but we should be able to do this pretty much, hopefully, no problem. Now, we might also add a few fuses in line. I think everything in this car is actually fused, but we'll have to verify that, because, again, I don't want an electrical fire to take this car out once we're done with it. Okay, yeah, we might want to add some fuses. It looks like there's some circuit breakers for the lighting and the auxiliary circuit breaker, but a lot of this stuff does not appear to be on any sort of fuse, so we might add a few fuses. Well, hopefully we got some stuff done in this video. I honestly have no idea. I haven't checked the footage in a while, so hopefully in the next part, though, we'll get these finished stripping down, get these things painted, and rewire this car. I think that'll actually make us some real progress, because then we might actually be able to hopefully get somewhat closer to actually starting this car and driving it again. But without further ado, I'll see you next time.